The spell that had been cast on Prince Devon of Lantimos was to be dispelled by the goddess of the small sun, who had the scent of daisies. Finally, this prophecy was to be fulfilled, for which he had been waiting for more than 10 years. One of his knights brought her to him. He could not see her with his own eyes, so he had to believe everything the servant said. She was the only young girl named Evelyn in Diego's family, so she had to be the goddess of the little sun. She really smelled like daisies, and that was the only reference point for the Dark Prince. He ordered her to be locked in this room until tomorrow. The fair-haired girl tried to stop the prince with her cry and not let the knight stop her, but he knew special tactics that made her quickly weaken in his hands. When Evelyn was 7 years old, her family finally moved to a new home, which was very exciting for her because she had been wanting to leave the area for a long time. A man came up to her and told her that everyone praised her, so he was happy to meet such a capable girl. They went to the man's huge estate. Evelyn was very happy because she did not like the life in the temple. Now she would not have to eat only grass and rice soup all the time and be punished by the elders. Finally, she had a home she could always return to and a loving father. She saw a familiar pattern on the flag hanging outside the huge mansion. It depicted the sun goddess, the symbol of the Diego clan. Suddenly she remembered that she was in the world inside the novel. She liked the same novel so much that she bought it even in paperback. The cover of the first volume depicted the sun goddess, and, if the girl was right, it consisted of 3 parts. The novel described a special divine power that was able to heal incurable diseases and lift curses that no one else could. Among the characters in the novel was the main character, named Cordelia, who had this divine power. She grew up in a temple orphanage and then was adopted by Diego, who abused her and used her powers for his own purposes. Despite all this, the main character, as in most novels, was able to overcome all difficulties, met the love of her life, and lived happily ever after. And the role of Evelyn in this story was that she was a minor character who appeared briefly at the very beginning. Her fate was quite similar to Cordelia's, but only at the very beginning. At the age of 15, a blonde girl was abused by her foster father because she could not use her powers. The orphanage told her that she had great powers. He spent a lot of money on her to bring her here, but his investment was in vain.
In the story, Evelyn spent too much power, so she died when she was not yet 13 years old. The divine powers are not infinite, so if you spend them before they have time to recover, you can die. After the death of his first adopted daughter, Count Diego had to take Cordelia under his care, and Evelyn remained only a means of demonstrating the divine power.
Even with the same abilities, someone still dies and someone stays alive. However, the girl of the world's hair was still alive. She was able to hold on because she did not use the divine power. She had to survive because as long as she was alive, Count Diego would not adopt Cordelia, and in the story, the prince had to kidnap a young girl from Count Diego's family. It was supposed to be Cordelia, but now it's going to be Evelyn. She will get out of here and gain her freedom. The Count's abuse of the girl did not stop, but she endured and held on. One day, the Count ordered her to use her powers, and if she refused, he would kill the puppy. She used magic to save the poor dog, but the Count did not keep his promise. Count Diego also had a son named Killian Diego. He always visited Evelyn and promised that he would find a way for her to get out of here, but his words never came true. When the blonde girl first arrived at the house, the basement, which was supposed to be her room, already showed signs of previous abuse. Count Diego was a truly horrible man, so it was easy to miss that these marks were left by his son Killian. Evelyn's brother always tried to help her whenever she went out on the estate. He would treat her marks from the Earl's abuse and ask her how else he could help her. To this request, the girl always replied that the boy should kill the Count. This was what she had always wanted. The boy always avoided fulfilling this request, but his question always encouraged the girl to have hope. In the end, Evelyn still had one request that her brother could fulfill without killing her father. It was lighter than the previous one, but still quite difficult. Evelyn asked him to bring her a pendant with a large yellow gemstone that she wanted to wear to the debutante ball. At the tea party, the other ladies noticed a scratch on Evelyn's precious face. The girl replied that it was caused by a careless fall. The girl could not believe that the ladies were such simple-minded conversationalists. Such a wound would hardly have been caused by a simple fall. Most likely, they believed everything they were told because of the greenhouse conditions in which they grew up. The ladies' tea party was interrupted by Sir Killian, who called Evelyn's name, which caused a pleasant shock to the girl's companions. He handed her a small box with the jewelry she had asked for earlier. This jewelry looked like an ordinary medallion, but in fact it contained a magical power that was the source of the flower scent. It was the only thing missing to complete her image in order to impersonate the main character. She thanked her brother for getting the medallion for his sister, even though it was hard to get anyway. Now she just had to wait for the debutante ball. The other ladies made the comment that Killian and Evelyn seemed quite friendly for relatives of a royal family. To others, Killian looked charming and responsible as the captain of the princess's guard. These qualities were enough to make ordinary ladies interested in him. The lady asked Killian what kind of girl he liked, and he replied that he liked girls with blonde hair and blue eyes like the sea. As he was saying this, he looked over at Evelyn, who was sitting next to the lady. She was a perfect match for his type. She also wondered who Killian's partner would be at the ball, and asked the blonde girl the same question. The latter was too absorbed in her thoughts that she would soon be leaving this house. The Dark Prince, who lost his eyesight due to a curse, had to hear that the goddess of the small sun, who smelled of chamomile, was to deliver him from the curse. After hearing this prediction, he was supposed to steal Cordelia according to the story. According to the story that Evelyn created, she takes Cordelia's place, so the prince has to steal her. Not long before these events, her brother Killian knocked on Evelyn's door at the mansion. Hearing no answer, he entered the room to ask if she had chosen a partner for the ball. His eyes rounded when he didn't see the girl in the room, but he did see the window left wide open. Evelyn woke up with a headache and looked around her and saw the prince's luxurious room. This could mean only one thing, that she had succeeded in her plan. A knight knocked on the door of the room. He already knew Evelyn, but she did not know him. It was he who had taken her to the prince yesterday, or rather stolen her. The knight said that the prince was already waiting for her. He remembered that he hadn't introduced himself and decided to fix it. He was an accompanying knight of Devon Lanthimos named Karen Weibo. Evelyn recognized him by his voice and told him so. He understood his guilt as well as his present guilt, but these were forced measures by order of Prince Lanthimos himself, to which the knight could not object. Leaving the luxurious room, Karen's knight led the blonde girl through the house, which was very quiet. There weren't many servants either, considering the size of the estate. Probably everyone was following the heavy and strict rules ordered by the prince. This dead silence was interrupted by the knight. He asked the girl if she knew about the prince's situation, and she replied that it was a well-known story, so she was no exception. There were bad rumors about him, and his accompanying knight knew about them. As Evelyn herself knew, the oracle chose the emperor's successor. The others who were not chosen were cursed, so the prince wanted revenge, and for that reason he got involved with the darkness. To tell the truth, the prince is not such a bad person if you get to know him better. Neither the prince nor his knight were to be feared, even though they had brought Evelyn to the manor in a less than pleasant way. At the table, the prince was the first to speak. He had heard that Evelyn could lift the curse from him, so he wanted to make a deal. The girl could indeed heal him, but she had some conditions. She needed money to leave the empire, and the couch just laughed and commented that he didn't know the goddess would treat him for money. This was not a big problem for the prince, so he accepted the condition. Among the many rumors, there was only one very strange one. People said that Count Diego's adopted daughter could not use her divine powers, so the prince expected rumors to remain rumors. The girl admitted that she does not use her magic powers at will, but it is not important. If the prince does not accept her conditions, she will assume that the conversation about healing never happened. The situation was not easy, so it was not possible to resolve this issue so easily, even if the prince wanted to. Pretending that this conversation never happened was just avoiding the problem. Evelyn had heard many rumors about the Dark Prince. People said that he was a very cruel man, but she was not going to fall for all the manipulations no matter how he threatened her, and she was going to reserve the right to choose how to use her powers. Her interlocutor was a little disappointed that she would react so fearlessly to all the rumors about him, and the situation that remained if she refused was even more unpleasant for the prince. In the end, he agreed to Evelyn's terms and assured her that he would do whatever she wanted to do to break the curse. She herself recalled that people said the prince had a terrible temper, but it was true. And most of all, he hated lies, so if it turned out that Evelyn had tried to lie to him about something, it could end her life abruptly. After Evelyn left the room, she was met by one of the maids who introduced herself as Hilda. It was clear she was nervous, as it was her first day in the position, so she promised to do her best. The young maid wanted to help the guest because she thought she was going to go to her room, but Evelyn said she wanted to look around the house, and Hilda felt obliged to accompany her. The guest wanted to look around the apartment to find all the exits just in case, and to make a plan for a possible escape. Asking Hilda how she knew where to go, even though she said it was only her first day in the job, the young maid replied that she had already toured the estate and checked it out. Apparently, she takes her job very seriously. The Dark Prince had strange thoughts that something was wrong with the situation. Even though the seal of the Count's clan symbolizes the sun goddess and this girl smelled like daisies, all the clues pointed to her. But for some reason, the sofa had a strange feeling that he had missed something. On her way down the garden path at the prince's mansion, Evelyn decided to ask the young maid how she came to be employed. Hilda told her that she had heard that the prince's estate was looking for a maid, although no one had worked there before. It was strange that the estate had no servants at all. The maid promised that she would not tell anyone that Evelyn would be the future wife of the prince. This shocked the girl, but she did not ask Hilda about it again so as not to provoke more rumors. The young maid asked Evelyn if the prince was really as bad a man as the rumors said. In fact, the girl did not know the answer to this question because she had just met him today and their conversation had not lasted long, but it might have been true. It had been a busy day yesterday, so Evelyn hadn't realized she had fallen asleep. The young maid Hilda had indeed given her a good tour of the house. Her memories of the day were interrupted by a knock at the door, and it was the prince's servant calling for breakfast. The prince was waiting for her in the dining room. Because she had just woken up and hadn't had time to clean herself up, she refused to sit down and eat breakfast at first, but Devon assured her that her appearance was of no importance. Finally, sitting down at the table, the girl said that she had noticed yesterday that there were very few servants in the mansion. Devon disagreed with her words because, besides them, his servant was also present in the room, to the point that he hired another maid personally for Evelyn. She did not complain about the inconvenience, but she was more concerned about the fact that the prince was alone in the house for days, not counting the butler. He replied that he did not like large crowds, and that the more people there were, the harder it was to remember the sound of their footsteps. After that, the room became quiet, so she thought she had said something unnecessary and crossed the line of an already very private prince. He broke the silence when he asked if Evelyn could start the treatment tonight. She had enough divine power to heal him, so she agreed. In the evening, while waiting for Evelyn to arrive in the room, someone began to speak to Devon. The unknown voice thought the whole situation was funny, but the prince ordered him to shut up and leave him alone. The voice wouldn't shut up, claiming that they had known the prince for 5 years, but he still thought he was just going crazy. His butler told him that he had brought Evelyn to the room so that she could begin to heal the prince. The girl sat down on the couch next to the prince and told him that before healing could begin, it was necessary to create a space that could accommodate the divine power. So today she was to simply give him all her strength and spend the next few days on the treatment itself. There was only one detail that made the blonde girl think. The novel described that Devon could not see anything, so he was constantly hitting objects around him. She was worried that he really couldn't see. Yesterday she noticed that he seemed to see everything, but she wasn't sure. Suddenly, during the healing, Evelyn stopped suddenly. She didn't fully understand what was happening to her because it had never happened before. Something was definitely missing from her ability to use her power, and it was as if this something instantly entered her and she began to behave strangely. Evelyn seemed to be in an unknown dimension, and an unknown voice greeted her. He said that she should not try to understand what was happening around her. He read her thoughts, and not only them, but he did not have time to tell her his true identity. Eventually, she realized that it was a dream when she saw the ceiling of the luxurious room. Hilda was already standing next to her, worried about the girl's health. Suddenly, Evelyn remembered yesterday and His Highness, so she asked the young maid what had happened to his treatment. Hilda said that during the healing, Evelyn had fainted, which frightened the maid. This meant that Devon was fine, but now she was worried about why she had fainted. Perhaps it was because she hadn't used her divine powers for too long. She didn't know much about the side effects of not using her divine powers often, but she was definitely going to heal the prince's eyes in a few days. As she was getting out of bed, Evelyn heard from her maid that she had heard that they were looking for her in the church. Of course, the Count had already started looking for his missing adopted daughter because she knew too many of his secrets and was a possible future prophet for him. After Evelyn had cleaned herself up, she decided to visit the prince. He was in his study talking to her with the help of a magic tool. In fact, she did not come to him without a reason because she wanted to ask him something. He told her that she had to wait until lunchtime to ask him a question that she wanted to know right now. She then accepted that she would not be able to get the answer she wanted now and would have to wait. If she doesn't find a reason for why she fainted yesterday, there is no guarantee that it won't happen again the next time. This could lead to Devon doubting her and considering her claims that she will cure him a lie. When Evelyn noticed the sword on the prince's shelf, she thought that she could test her divine powers with it. When she asked if she could look at the sword, the prince did not say anything. It was as if he did not hear her, so she took it as a sign of consent. A moment later, the sword was in Evelyn's hands. With one hand, she touched the sharp blade, which injured her hand. The prince quickly jumped up from his chair and approached Evelyn. The girl said that she did not want to get the floor dirty. The couch took the girl's actions as a threat, so he said that she had chosen the wrong target. In fact, he misunderstood the girl. She wanted to test her strength because she had some questions about yesterday's treatment. The injury did indeed disappear in a moment, but it led the girl to a dead end. Evelyn apologized for any displeasure her actions might have caused the prince and mentioned another reason she had come to see him. She also learned that the temple was looking for her, but the prince said he could not let her go until she had removed the curse from him. She did not mean that she wanted him to let her go, but that she did not want to be in that place again. The temple had hardly realized that she was in the prince's house, but now he wondered why she did not want to return. Evelyn did not want to tell the prince the full truth, so she said that after she was healed, she wanted to receive the money that had been promised in the agreement and then leave his house. She preferred to explain it this way to avoid unnecessary questions and problems. The temple had a perfect image in the empire, so it protected it and its owners from unpleasant rumors. Even if she told the truth about what she went through while there, no one would believe her. Adults forced children who had magical powers to heal other people by working without breaks. In addition, they were not fed properly, so they had almost no strength. After an already difficult day, they continued to be abused. No one knew about this side of the temple except the victims themselves. Whatever the beginning, the deal was done, so Evelyn had to do her best to break the curse on Devon and get him to help her leave her empire. That's why no one was to know that Evelyn was hiding here. From the moment the sword fell into the girl's hands and injured her, Devon began to chase her around the house to prevent her from doing something like that again, but she assured him that this was not necessary. The prince could not understand why such a quiet church suddenly began to make noise. He also wondered how Evelyn had learned about it. The girl replied that Hilda had told her. The maids always have the latest rumors. People also said that one of the residents of the church is now in a serious state of illness. The name of this girl was Cordelia. The blonde girl's face instantly turned pale when she heard the name of the real protagonist. She lied about never having heard that name to avoid the topic of her being associated with it. It turns out that Evelyn took away Cordelia's role, so she is still in the temple and continues to be abused. Her illness was probably caused by the fact that she had spent too much energy and reached her limit. In order to restore those with powerful magical powers, you need someone with a similar level of power of their own. Evelyn was perfect for this, so perhaps the temple was looking for her to use to heal Cordelia. Cordelia was much stronger than Evelyn, so the temple would not spare the blonde's strength to restore the source of their status. Evelyn believes she could plot in her favor, but it seems that no matter what she does, she will not be able to change her fate. When she was done thinking about the fact that she could not change her fate, she finally accepted it and went to the room where the prince and his knight were waiting for her. The knight asked her what had happened, and she replied that she missed her home very much. The knight quickly realized that it was time for him to leave, so he left the prince with the girl. Suddenly, Devon started talking about Killian, but the blonde girl quickly changed the subject, saying that it was getting late, so they should start healing now. Today, she wanted to try to put the divine power into the whole body, so the prince didn't have to worry about it because it was safe. He wasn't worried about himself. He was worried about Evelyn because she might faint again like she did yesterday. She denied all of the prince's worries and said that it was probably because she hadn't used her power for a long time, but that she should be fine now. Evelyn reassured herself that everything would work out now because it had happened at the wrong time and place. That voice sounded in her head again, so she quickly pulled her hand away from the prince's. Yesterday she thought that she heard the voice because she had not used her divine powers for a long time, but she was wrong. There was something in Devon's right eye, something that was different from the story that was described in the novel. There were too many strange things, because the blonde girl had fainted during the healing yesterday and still hadn't used her powers today. Most likely it was because she was afraid, but if she was really the girl from the prediction, she shouldn't be afraid of the curse. The oracle sent this curse so that those who were not chosen could not take revenge or rebel against the ruler. For this reason, they spend their whole lives looking for those who can lift the curse, but in the end, when they find them, they continue to live their normal lives. Only Devon and the protagonist, who was trapped in Evelyn's body, knew the contents of this prophecy, so it hasn't raised any suspicions for him until now. She couldn't have fainted again, otherwise it would have raised even more doubts, but her mind was being clouded against her will. Evelyn had already thought about not changing the plot of the book and simply fleeing the Empire. After Killian entered the service of the Imperial Palace, he was free to come and go from the county. This led her to believe that he could help her financially. When asked for money, he replied that if she was going to be in the county all this time, she would have nothing to spend it on. This implied that she was not in the first place in his relationship with Killian, although at first glance it seemed that he was really ready to help her. Killian would never let her leave the county, so her only option was the couch. He was going to steal it, and in exchange for a cure, she would be able to escape. It was a last-ditch effort to stay alive, but she hadn't taken into account that her family was no fools, so her plan backfired when Killian caught her. It was just a stupid dream like all the others, but now it was not a young maid sitting at her bedside, but a prince. She noticed this when he suddenly began to speak. He would have been curious what new excuse she would come up with. The girl said that her divine power was lacking something, but the problem was not with the girl herself, but with her patient. Evelyn promised that she would make sure that his left eye would start to see tonight. What she meant was that she would continue to treat him until she knew what was wrong with his right eye. This was the last attempt to check Devon's doubts. If the prince had already begun to suspect her, the fair-haired girl could not sit idly in her room and look for a way to escape. She was helped in this by a young maid who kept Evelyn waiting because of the amount of work she had to do. As the blonde girl approached the gate, where the guards were standing, one of them stopped her and told her that she could not go any further. This was not an order from the prince, but they had to follow the established regulations. When Evelyn heard a familiar voice, she looked around and saw Knight Weibo, who had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. It was as if he had been watching her. Deciding to seize the moment, she asked the knight to accompany her on a walk outside the gate. To do so, the knight Weibo had to ask the prince's permission, so Evelyn asked one of the guards to go to him and ask for permission. While the guard was returning, she decided to ask the knight if she could address him by his first name, and based on his permission, she allowed herself to be called by his first name as well. The guard came back very quickly and told Evelyn and Knight Weibo that His Highness had given his permission for Knight Weibo to escort the girl off the estate. Evelyn was about to warn Hilda, but realized that she had escaped only now. Outside the castle, she learned that it was surrounded by a river, so the only way to get out was over a bridge. Compared to the size of the castle itself, there were few guards. Evelyn's current problem was only Karen Weibo. Weibo's family was a well-known knightly clan, so it followed that he was probably a very strong knight. If she tried to run away, he would capture her immediately, so she had to be very careful now. Deciding to start from the very end, the girl asked if the knight had ever been outside the Empire. He answered that he had to leave the Empire because of military campaigns, and before he came here, he served in the Border Knightly Order. Evelyn admitted that she had never left the county and was asked if Karen had been to the north in the city of Elian. The protagonist accidentally read about Elian in a book when she was looking for a place to escape, so they tried to get as much information about it as possible. Karen had been there, but he admitted that it snows all year round in Elian, so it was difficult to live there and to move around. It was as if Evelyn was able to get her interlocutor talking. Thanks to Karina's endless chatter, she was convinced that Elian was just right to stay there, at least for the time being. The garden, to Evelyn's surprise, looked very nice. It really looked like it had been regularly and well maintained. These words made Karen laugh a little, and he said that the garden was entirely the soldiers' fault, because before them it looked ridiculous. For a long time the soldiers had nothing to do, so this garden became their main occupation out of boredom. There were no problems for a long time, and His Highness was not interested in the throne or politics at all. When Evelyn met him personally, she found out that all the rumors were lies and that the prince had no interest in palace affairs. The couch only wanted to break the curse and go on living his normal, quiet life in his estate. To the blonde girl, it reminded her a little bit of herself, but a protagonist and a secondary character cannot be alike. At the house, Evelyn sat next to the prince and was about to begin healing. She was not at all confident in her powers, but she said otherwise. She could have lost consciousness during the treatment, but the divine powers would still reach her patient. It was the last time, and this time it was all right. Evelyn gave him the divine power, but only through her left hand, and she did not have that strange feeling. It seems that she was losing her consciousness because of the aura coming from the right side of the prince's body. The same aura again began to capture her divine power. This energy was dark, but she was able to overcome it. It was very hard for Evelyn, but she was able to finish the healing and told the prince not to open his eyes right away. She kept her promise, so she expected the same from Devon. His Highness agreed to this and asked if the payment would be in cash or precious stones. She was unsure about the amount of money she would need to leave the empire. Suddenly, the prince asked the girl what she looked like, which was a bit of an unexpected question, so he decided to ask the same question to his butler, who had just entered the room. The butler described Evelyn as a girl with green and yellow hair like flower petals and blue eyes like the sea. The brooch left by the queen would have been a perfect match for them. The brooch looked very expensive, but Devon assured her that he would give her some gold to take with her before she left. As Evelyn was about to leave, Hilda came up to her and asked her where she got the money. The bag contained about enough money for the young maid's family to live on for 3 months. Evelyn did not remember exactly how many people were in her family, but eventually she estimated that there were 4 of them together. Evelyn had enough money to last an average peasant family for 3 months, but she was more concerned about whether she could heal Devon. There was no telling when the temple would come for her, so it would be best to go to Elian right now while Devon still trusted her. If she didn't completely destroy the curse and escape, there was no telling what would happen to Devon's eyes, and that scared her a little. The door to Evelyn's room was open, so she assumed that Hilda had forgotten to close it again. Looking out into the long, dark corridor, the blonde girl did not see the maid, but heard the sound of unknown footsteps that quickly disappeared behind one of the doors. As Evelyn walked through the garden with Karen, she noticed a wall that she thought could be easily climbed down. Judging by the large puffs of smoke and its location, it was the kitchen. She decided to check her guesses and went inside. The kitchen was very noisy, and the cooks were working quickly while their chef gave orders. She explained her sudden visit by saying that she was just looking around the castle. The large number of people was due to the fact that His Highness is a true gourmet, so he has quite a few servants in the kitchen, unlike other parts of the castle. As strange rumors were circulating about her and Devon, when asked about the prince's favorite food, Chef reacted very strongly. She said that he liked fresh salads and undercooked meat. She also suggested that the girl was interested in this, because she was the future mistress of the castle. The only door to the kitchen was always closed at 11 in the evening when the cooks finished their work. Even if the girl was hungry after that time, she would not be able to enter the kitchen unnoticed, but the chef assured her that she could ask the butler. The butler had all the keys to the castle, so it would be even harder for her to climb down the wall, but she had to do it to avoid dying. She checked almost all the ways to escape, and if she was lucky and could heal the prince's right eye, she wouldn't need them. Suddenly, on her way from the kitchen to her room, Evelyn met Devon. She was very frightened of him because she had never seen him walking around the kitchen before. In shock, she accidentally stumbled and almost fell, but the prince reacted quickly and saved her from falling. Evelyn apologized for her carelessness, and Devon was surprised to hear her voice because he still didn't understand who had been so careless walking around his house. It was a good coincidence that he met her now, because he wanted to talk to her. The prince said that he had missed something in yesterday's conversation and was on his way to find Evelyn. Her brother, Killian Diego, had asked him for an audience. He had no way of knowing that she was here now, so it probably had nothing to do with the girl. The prince had heard that the blonde girl was close to her brother, so he allowed her to look at him from afar. Evelyn already knew that Killian was going to catch her, but she did not understand how he knew where she was. Killian was the head of the guard of the prince's sister, so it was not surprising that he decided to visit him. The couch could not refuse this meeting because if he did not receive the knight, he might be suspected of preparing a rebellion against the crown princess. Killian was due to arrive tomorrow, so she decided to try to heal the prince's right eye today. Devon wanted to get rid of the curse as soon as possible, so he could not refuse this healing. They agreed to meet in the evening. Evelyn wondered whether the Earl knew about this or whether it was Killian's own initiative, but she was more concerned that if she was caught again, she would be imprisoned. She had already begun to think about persuading Killian to run away with her, but he would not agree, and Evelyn herself did not want to live with him for the rest of her life. She had to leave this place before he got here. A knight like Karen could easily apprehend her and turn her over to the prince, so slipping past him would not be easy. She already had a plan. Namely, Evelyn was to steal the keys from the kitchen, jump out the window, climb down the wall, climb over the fence, cross the bridge, and then head for the border. But she didn't know if she could execute it. The blonde girl's thoughts were interrupted by a young maid who quietly approached her. The protagonist always had a strange feeling next to Hilda. She missed the moment when Hilda stopped being afraid of her and stuttered. Hilda herself said that it was only her first day, but even then she knew the location of all the rooms in the castle. In addition, she very quickly heard rumors from the temple, which was no less surprising. Was she really just an ordinary maid? Evelyn's guess was right, and Hilda, or what was behind her face, was an extraordinary maid. Her expression changed dramatically, and she began to recall some of the moments from Evelyn's childhood. Hilda said that she had no other way but to stay close to Evelyn. Karen was supposed to be watching the blonde girl. She was supposed to call him, but it was too risky, and Hilda herself would not have allowed her to do so. After Hilda's words that it would be best to erase this situation from Evelyn's memory, the protagonist really forgot about it all. Evelyn felt as if something had disappeared from her mind, but she did not understand what it was. Hilda asked her if she liked daisies, and she replied that she didn't really like them. If you look closely, there were daisies all over the castle, most likely planted on purpose. The prince was already waiting for Evelyn in the room. The prince told her that the doctor had assured him that the curse was gone, but that it would take a few days for him to see without problems. Today, Evelyn was going to heal his left eye, and after that he would be able to regain his sight completely. Ever since the blonde girl began to heal Devon's left eye, he no longer doubted her abilities. They were going to elope if she failed to heal his right eye, but now, seeing how much he trusts her, she feels guilty towards him. No matter how hard she tried, the strange voice she had heard while I was unconscious was still there. It was no ordinary curse, and it made her doubt whether she would be able to break it at all. Such a powerful force could, on the contrary, absorb Evelyn's divine power. The voice suggested that she trust it, and it would take away her divine power, from which she had suffered so much. This would make her life much easier, but she still hesitated. The voice grew louder and thus more convincing. Her physical body remained relaxed while her mind was in an unknown city. She still didn't understand why she was trying so desperately to stay alive, but remembering her future freedom and her desire to go to Elion, she returned to her physical body. This loud and persuasive voice almost made her take the path of certain death. Now she relied only on her thoughts and decided to do her best to heal the prince. Of course, the unknown being did not like this, so it drained all of Evelyn's divine powers, and she lost consciousness. This was the last attempt, and Evelyn realized that the prince would not give her permission for more. She had lost to this creature of mine, who was too strong even for her divine powers, which she had saved for this very purpose, so she had to flee now. As planned, Evelyn ran to the kitchen. At first she thought the door was closed, but the handle turned easily, allowing her to enter the kitchen. There was no time to think, so she decided that she had been fooled at first. When she saw the window, she quickly jumped through it and began to climb down. The wall was quite steep, but it was not difficult to climb. Even though Evelyn had a hard life, she had never climbed a wall before, and surprisingly, it didn't seem that hard. Suddenly, one of the girl's feet slipped off the brick and she started to fall to the ground. From this height, she should have hit hard, but the landing was quite soft. The girl decided to attribute all her luck to a simple coincidence. She stopped thinking it was a coincidence when an unknown force, which looked like a dark aura in Devon's right eye, helped her drive the guards away from the gate. In front of the gate, she saw a barrier of a rather high level, but with her power, she was able to cross it. Evelyn looked over and saw a light burning in the window of Devon's room. She was really sorry to leave him so easily, but if everything had gone according to the plot of the novel, he would have met Cordelia and been freed from the curse. Evelyn herself changed their fates. Suddenly, she noticed that she had lost her locket, but maybe it was for the best. She no longer had any reason to smell daisies for the sake of the couch. This place would now remain only in her memories and possible dreams. On her way out of the castle, the fair-haired girl heard the sound of horses' hooves coming toward her. Killian and the rest of his knights were approaching the castle. He wasn't supposed to arrive until tomorrow, so Evelyn was surprised and hid among the trees as quickly as possible. Evelyn's legs were running on their own. She kept thinking that she just had to run. It didn't matter where she went as long as she got as far away as possible. Pushing aside the leaves of the trees in front of her, she opened up a view of a magical sunrise that would take her to a place where no one could find her. The curse was broken, but the prince could not wake up. He was woken up by a noise around him, Karen's voice talking to a doctor who was trying to explain that Devon's case was very rare. Eventually, the man got out of bed. The butler eventually explained that on the day Evelyn treated Devon's eye, they both fainted, so the butler called a doctor and a priest. The latter assured him that the curse had been broken, but the prince did not regain consciousness for a long time after that. In addition, Evelyn also disappeared, or to be more precise, she ran away. Even though the prince refused to believe that the girl was capable of such a thing, all the signs pointed to it. Fate was on her side, so all the obstacles that Devon had tried so hard to create were overcome by chance. Devon said that as soon as he was back to normal, the first thing he would do was to change the security. The butler also handed His Highness a locket that had been found on the day Evelyn disappeared. It smelled of daisies, just like the blonde girl. The medallion itself looked like a magical object, but not dangerous. Devon's permission was required for more research, but he decided to leave it at that, because Evelyn had fulfilled her promise and lifted the curse, and the prince had no reason to pursue her further. His eyesight could be restored in a few days if he started intensive vision training right away. All this time, the wizards maintained the amount of vitamins and nutrients in the prince's body, but he still needed to return to his normal state because he had been unconscious for about a year. It was quite loud in the kitchen because the prince was to take off his bandage today. One of the maids was afraid that the prince would feel sick when he heard that he had been unconscious for a year. Their chatter was interrupted by the chef, who ordered them to work even harder because they needed to feed Devon well so that he would regain his strength as soon as possible. One of them kept asking if Evelyn would return, but the chief did not know this either. After the prince lost consciousness, Evelyn concealed her whereabouts all this time. The maids missed Evelyn very much because she ate everything they cooked, leaving only clean plates behind. The time came for her prince to remove the blindfold from his eyes. Everyone was still under the impression, but he asked them to leave the room to be with his doctor. His eyes opened wide when he took off the blindfold, but his right eye was still blurry. According to Evelyn, she was going to leave the Empire when their agreement was finalized, and most likely she did just that. All the servants knew that the prince's right eye was still sore, which meant that the rumors would quickly reach the capital. The prince quickly returned to normal, so he was able to continue his normal activities without having to spend about a year in bed. During this time, it seemed to Devon that Karen had weakened, but he said that this was only by the standards of the prince himself. The knight and his majesty hadn't had a sword fight in a long time, so the former still couldn't believe that Devon had regained consciousness. Although the prince's right eye was not seeing clearly, it did not cause him any inconvenience in his daily life. He was glad that he no longer heard that strange voice and no longer had to listen to the sound of footsteps. It seemed very strange that despite the curse being gone, his eyes still had poor vision. The prince was suddenly called by the butler, who said that the analysis of the medallion was completed. It contained no magical powers, only a liquid that had the scent of chamomile. It was not known how Evelyn knew about the prediction, but it was known that she had deceived him. The rumors of the Dark Prince's healing have reached the islands, so judging by the letter they recently sent, they have been waiting for this moment since His Highness collapsed a year ago. Devon asked his butler to write the letter for him, but the butler said that if the princess found out about it, the prince would not hear anything good from her. The princess had never visited Devon when he had been unconscious for a year, so he did not care what she thought of him now. Evelyn most likely ran away because she knew she couldn't fully heal the prince, but he wanted to find her anyway because he thought she had another reason. It seemed to him that her brother Killian Diego might know where this fraudster was, so the prince accepted his request for an audience in his castle. Killian tried to start from the end by congratulating the prince on his healing and deliverance from the curse. The guest ignored the prince's questions about what he had to do with his healing, but his main words slipped out of his head when he saw the medallion he had given to his sister long before. Most likely, Killian came here to look for his sister, not to ask about something important. Perhaps he was worried about his missing sister, so he searched for her wherever he could. And the prince's estate was no exception. However, the prince did not understand why he had asked for an audience a few days after hearing about what was happening in such a quiet castle of Divan. Killian quickly got up from the chair he was sitting on and began to ask the prince about Evelyn's whereabouts. He believed that she was in Devon's room or hidden somewhere in the house. He had to find her, even if it meant losing his life. The prince allowed him to search his house, even if Killian had to turn the place upside down, but he had a week to do so. If he doesn't find Evelyn, he has to say goodbye to his life. The relationship between Count Diego's children seemed incredibly strong, as Knight Killian entered every room and checked every corner. One had the feeling that he was not looking for his sister, but for his beloved. In one of the rooms of the castle, there was a crumpled blanket on the bed, as if someone was hiding under it, but unfortunately Evelyn was not there. Meanwhile, Evelyn, who was no longer Evelyn, started a new life in Snowy Ellion with a new name, Leah. For the past few months, she had been constantly worried that someone would come for her, but the information from other countries was not well received in this snowy region, so no one came here and the days were rather quiet. The people of Eliuna did not know Leah's real story, because she made up a story that she came here because she had lost her entire family. The man from whom she always bought meat felt sad every time she told him this story, so he gave her a discount. Walking along a road through the forest, which she had decided to take as a shortcut home because of her heavy burden, she encountered a monster. There were many legends about the danger of Eliana, but the blonde girl did not think they were true. A giant monster that looked like a green fox grabbed the girl and tried to eat her. She had had such a hard time getting out of the circumstances of the story, so she couldn't die so senselessly. The girl began to scream for someone to save her, but her cries were heard. Devon saved her from falling. She was so shocked that she was found so quickly, and that the incarnation still did not affect the prince's right eye, so she could not say a word. The prince guessed that the blonde girl was not the girl from the prediction because he found her locket. He didn't know how she knew the contents of the prediction, but he knew she was very good at playing the fraud. Despite the couch's accusations that she was to blame for the house's failure to fully heal him, Evelyn worried that his right eye was completely unable to see, but he quickly contradicted her words. She knew from the beginning that she would not be able to heal the prince completely, but even the girl with the foresight would probably not have been able to do so, because there was something in the eye besides the curse itself. Evelyn didn't know how to get rid of it, so she didn't do it. The prince took advantage of the right moment and the reduced distance between them to take a closer look at the girl's face and hair, and the butler's words were true, for Evelyn had golden hair and blue eyes. All this time, the girl had been pretending to be the girl from the vision, so at least for that she had to be punished, even though she had not fulfilled the terms of the agreement, so the prince had no choice but to marry her. While Evelyn was packing up her belongings from her home with Elian, the prince informed her that the brooch Devon had given her had magic on it that allowed her to track her location. There was no need to destroy it, as it would come in handy again and again. The girl did not think she was leaving her home in Eliunu forever, so she packed a minimum of her belongings. Devon told her that she was not coming back here, so she had to take absolutely all her things. She didn't want to marry the prince, but he started manipulating her into getting stuck in the forest with the monster again. Eventually, she found herself in the carriage that was taking her and the prince to the castle. She asked the prince why he was talking about marriage so suddenly, since a whole year had passed and he should have forgotten about the situation, but he did not give a clear answer, so she decided to change the subject. He wondered why she had not sold the brooch he had used to track her down. Evelyn replied that she could not sell such an important and valuable brooch because it had previously belonged to the Empress. Returning to the topic of marriage, the prince replied that only Evelyn was able to break the curse with that girl with the foresight, so there had to be a connection. None of the other doctors, magicians, and priests could heal his eye, so the last hope was for the girl. The girl decided to tell us that during her last treatment, she had talked to a dark creature that prevented the prince's right eye from healing. She didn't remember the exact words, but it definitely didn't say goodbye. For some reason, this being was interested in Evelyn and had no intention of harming her. It could have been anything that was taller than a human, so one assumption was that the creature was a deity, but with skills like Evelyn's, she would have likely been able to recognize it. Evelyn had few memories of the creature, but she did remember that it had an unpleasant laugh. This led Devon to find similarities between their imaginary guests because it was possible that this creature was familiar to him. Finally, the carriage arrived at the castle, and Evelyn was greeted by Hilda, who missed her dearly. She could not remember if she had ever been so close to the young maid before, but she was glad to be expected. In addition to Hilda, Evelyn also met the knight Karen, who did not expect that the girl had such skills that she easily climbed down such a high wall and overcame the barrier. His armor became many times thicker, most likely due to the fact that he was severely punished for her escape. Thanks to the girl, he now got up at dawn and trained with the other guards, and the castle itself had significantly increased security, as it was now manned around the clock. Now they slept 3 hours a day, but their day became much more disciplined. Their conversation was interrupted by the prince, who asked them to end it quickly and go inside the castle. Once inside the castle, Evelyn finally sat down, although she was afraid of getting the chairs dirty because she thought her dress was too dirty. Elion was not famous for its good facilities, but only for its views of nature, so there was no reason to be surprised at the girl's appearance. She was presented with a document that was for the conclusion of their marriage, as the prince had assured her. Evelyn was very surprised and left her chair because she had not given her consent to this engagement. It was not in her interest to come here, but she could not jump out of the carriage on the way. The prince realized that she wanted to escape the empire, and he even knew the reason why. The butler told Devon that on the day Evelyn arrived at the apartment, he found bruises on her target, so it was easy to understand that Count Diego had abused her, and Killian, although he was obsessed with her, could not help. Killian Diego was now inside the house. It had been a year since Evelyn had disappeared from the Count's house, and her brother had been searching for her. That was the reason why Devon had asked her to marry him, because if she agreed, neither the gambler nor her brother would be able to get close to the girl anymore. He could guarantee her complete safety until she found out how to heal his right eye, and then she could leave the empire, as they had originally agreed. In their case, marriage was the most reliable and logical solution. It would be strange if Evelyn stayed here for no reason, and in the case of marriage, she would definitely not be able to escape. Finding a real healer from the foresight would have taken some time, so the prince had to wait for his healing. In any case, he already knew Evelyn, so that was the logical reason why he trusted her more than an unknown healer. The illogical reason was that he wanted to try her again and see what would happen. It seemed like a good offer, even if Evelyn escaped again. There was no telling when she would be captured again. But when she became a duchess, she wouldn't have to worry about that. Moreover, she wondered why she remembered what had happened in her past life and wondered what kind of dark force it was. Devon had a terrible temper, so he didn't even tell the girl that he had been unconscious for a year, but most likely he just didn't want to burden Evelyn. When she found out, she started blaming herself. Even after that, he wants to experience it again. It was hard to think consciously because my feelings were taking over. If you look at him as a groom, he had good looks, status, and financial situation. But the only thing that spoiled this beautiful picture was his terrible character. Thinking back to the monster in the forest the day Evelyn went back to the prince's castle, she remembered that the animal had a crystal in its forehead, which meant that the monster was brought from the temple. Most likely, the temple needed the girl's body to heal Cordelia. The whole situation looked strange. Even the temple and Killian still hadn't forgotten about Evelyn's existence, even though a year had passed. The girl was tired of this danger and eternal hiding, so she decided to put an end to it. Hilda suddenly and quietly entered the room where Evelyn was sitting. She had a similar feeling that something like this had happened before. The young maid had a lot to tell Evelyn during her absence, so she began to hurry Evelyn along. Tonight was the night of the ball, for which the maid had already prepared the girl's dress. Rumors of the prince's wedding had already spread everywhere, even though Evelyn had not yet given her consent. This dress was chosen by the prince himself, so Evelyn had a matching brooch with an identical gemstone color. Hilda continued to chatter on and on, telling the girl everything that had happened in the last year at the manor. During this year, Evelyn had forgotten how talkative her maid was. After stopping this flow of information, she asked Hilda if she had heard that Evelyn's brother was now in the duchy. Of course, the maid knew about this information, so Evelyn asked about Killian's conversation with the prince. Hilda's strange behavior was compounded by words that the Hilda she knew would not have said. The maid asked what she would get in return for telling what the two had talked about. The situation quickly changed when Hilda revealed her true identity. In fact, Hilda was still Hilda, but her body now belonged to a dark creature who reported that she could see things that Evelyn could not while looking at the door. This information disappeared from the blonde girl's mind again, along with the pain, and she began to suspect something, because it all happened after the conversation with the young maid. Evelyn also felt as if something had suddenly disappeared from her memories. At sunset, Evelyn put on her dress and went outside. She was suddenly called out by a prince who was dressed in similar clothes. This was the whole ball for which Hilda was preparing the girl. Suddenly Devon called out to Killian, who came out from the side of the beautiful garden. It had been exactly a week since they had made a deal that Evelyn's brother had to find her within a week, or else he would have to say goodbye to his life. The girl had agreed to the marriage anyway, but the prince thought it would be better to show a little performance to her crazy brother first. Although it made a lot of logical sense and was absolutely necessary, it was entertaining, so Devon should not miss this opportunity to have fun. Evelyn was used to faking her emotions, so she decided to play along with the prince. She began to pretend that she really wanted the marriage to take place as soon as possible, so the situation began to escalate in Killian's eyes, and the prince was pleased. Killian thought that all this time where he had been hiding the girl on his territory, but they had an agreement that Evelyn's brother had not fulfilled. Rules were rules. Killian had a week to do it. His sister was found by Devon, so the night was defeated. Deciding that she would not wait another minute for Annie, Evelyn took matters into her own hands and walked closer to where the marriage contract was located and sealed it with her own blood. Her marriage to Devon was now considered valid, and she could not dissolve it unless she entered into a new contract through blood. Their marriage was also confirmed by a witness who acted as a witness. The events that had taken place before Killian's eyes still did not fit in his head. He could not accept the fact that Evelyn was now married. He asked to talk to her, but she refused. Killian never showed his true self in public, but this time he was really shocked. The prince grabbed his hand and noticed that Evelyn did not want to hear Killian. The boy had to hear at least His Highness's words, but he was still in a state of shock, so he began to beg Devon to return Evelyn to him. After all the rejections from the prince and Evelyn herself, the boy could no longer find the right words, so he decided to give up. He quickly hid behind one of the corners of the prince's mansion, but Evelyn still thought it was too suspicious. Today was a long and difficult day for the Duchess. First, she had to think about and make her decision about the marriage contract. Then Killian came to the ball and put on a show, and then the butler made her learn her duties as a duchess. She had not yet accepted the fact that she was married, which meant that she had to prepare for the wedding ceremony. She also had to solve all the problems with the temple and report them to Devon. On the way to her room, she thought about it all and couldn't believe that Killian had given up so easily. Her unnecessary worries about Killian's easy acceptance of the situation were true. When she entered her room, he was already waiting for her. He offered to return to Duke Diego's estate and continue living his normal life. Evelyn did not consider that cellar her home, where she spent most of her childhood. She realized that if she returned, the Count would again ban her from that basement without the right to freedom. He had promised for years that he would save her, but he hadn't done it, and he wouldn't do it this time either, so she couldn't believe his words. All this time he had just stood by and watched, pretending not to notice, but now Evelyn was an adult, so she didn't need his help anymore. She could no longer hear what her crazy and obsessed brother was saying, so she hurried out of her room, leaving the intruder alone. Evelyn asked him to leave her room as quickly as possible and as quietly as possible so that no one would hear him. Once she was on the other side of the door, Evelyn ran quickly down the long corridor to one of the rooms in the castle that was as far away from hers as possible. She didn't keep track of how long she waited for Killian to leave her room, but she was worried the whole time that he was still there. She was afraid that if she left the room, she would run into Killian again, so she decided to wait a little longer. While Evelyn was sleeping, a young maid came to visit her, but she was half asleep and could not answer, so Hilda sat down next to her and told her not to worry about anything. The next morning, she woke up on the couch. The butler who had been attending to her said that he had not woken her up because she was sound asleep, but asked her why she had decided to spend the rest of the night on this couch instead of in a comfortable bed. Evelyn said that she had been so tired last night that she didn't even realize she had fallen asleep. Butler was surprised to see her covered with a blanket this morning. The girl thinks that Hilda was asleep right away, and it was probably her who carried Evelyn to the couch and covered her with a blanket. The protagonist was supposed to thank her when she met her and possibly give her a gift. Deciding to ask the butler if he knew Hilda's whereabouts, since she had been with the girl all night and had probably not slept well, the Duchess wanted to thank her and let her go for one day. The man in front of her had no idea what she was talking about, because he didn't know who Hilda was. This was simply not possible, as there was no sign of Hilda in the maid's room. Evelyn assumed that Hilda had given a false name, so she asked where the maid who had lived in the room had gone, but the butler said that no one had used it for a long time. Suddenly the man remembered that a maid had lived in this room about a year ago, and he snapped his fingers. It worked on Evelyn, and she began to gradually remember the day she sat in front of the daisies, and for the first time she doubted Hilda and their conversation with the maid yesterday. When he asked the knight Karen about Hilda, he also could not recall the existence of such a maid in their castle. Hilda definitely existed, but no one remembered her. It was similar to the way Evelyn's memories had disappeared, and perhaps Hilda was involved. Evelyn decided to ask Devon about this question, because she believed that Hilda might be a supernatural being or that something had entered her body to control her. It was as if this being had created Hilda's body from the beginning. She decided not to talk about the incident with Killian, as it was not related to the current topic of the disappearance of one of the maids, and she wanted to resolve this issue without Devon's knowledge, as it concerned only her and her brother. The prince may have known this unknown being. About 7 years ago, at first he heard a nasty laugh in his head, and then he began to recognize objects around him even though he could not see them. It was always talking to Devon and laughing, but after healing it stopped. The girl learned that she had thought that during her escape, it was this force that helped her climb down the wall and overcome the barrier, but after that it disappeared. It turned out that this power penetrates its target through the eye and creates all the conditions under which it can interact with the physical body, and then disappears without a trace. If this creature was indeed a deity, then Devon had no choice but to fight it. Evelyn didn't think it was the right thing to do, but the prince saw no other way to solve the problem with his eye, since it was unlikely to talk. Evelyn didn't know for sure, but she felt that this creature did not have an evil aura, and its actions were aimed at helping her physical body because it helped Devon to distinguish objects, and the girl to escape from the castle. They did not have time to sit around and do nothing, so the prince wanted to ask the creature whether it had evil intentions or not in person. First, they had to go to the temple and have a wedding ceremony, because they were married according to the documents from yesterday, but the girl did not want to go to the temple right now. This event was mandatory because the main goal was to let as many people as possible know about their wedding. It was completely lost on them that the priest from the church had recently been looking for Evelyn, but now that she was a duchess, he had to guarantee her complete safety. Even if they were looking for her in the temple, no one would dare to keep her there against her will. The temple was a crueler place than Devon had ever imagined. Suddenly, Evelyn remembered a monster in the forest, with a white crystal in its forehead, which meant that it belonged to the temple. The girl said that these crystals belonged to a shelter on the temple grounds. She had grown up in one of them, but she was not the only one in Volodya who had magical powers. The temple workers extracted these magical powers from the children and placed them in white crystals that resembled magic crystals. Usually, the children did not die when their powers were taken away, but were completely devastated, as if they had no soul. The prince promised to send Karen to Elian to find either the monster or what was left of it. If Karen finds no trace of it, it will mean that someone from the temple took care of it. Devon didn't have full faith in Evelyn, but if the temple was involved, he was in trouble. As the ceremonies were in full swing, a woman came to Evelyn to take care of her appearance at the wedding. Eventually, Devon declared that the wedding would take place in the temple and sent the Ghanaians to the empire. He thought it would make the temple people even more angry that they could not do anything for Evelyn, even though she was so close. After that, he dumped all the preparations on Evelyn's shoulders, making the excuse that he was busy. The woman who was doing the girl's hair looked out the window and saw Karen, who had already returned from Elliot. Without waiting for the woman to finish her hair, Evelyn quickly jumped out of her chair and ran to the door. Quickly bursting into Karen's room, the girl began to ask him about his trip to Elion. The knight was very surprised by the blonde girl's strong reaction, so he assumed that she was in love with him. All of his assumptions were interrupted by the butler, who addressed Evelyn as Duchess. The man asked to behave appropriately with Her Highness in order not to be reprimanded or punished. It was very strange that Karen didn't know anything about Devon and Evelyn's wedding, since there were so many rumors around the castle. He had been busy with work all this time, so now was a good time to catch up on everything he had missed, so he started asking around about where and when the ceremony would take place. All this meaningless talk was really annoying the prince, so he decided to come to the point. Karen went to all the trade guilds, but he could not find anything, which meant that the temple had already been covered up. However, he could not say that he came up empty-handed, because he was lucky enough to meet a witness. According to his words, he saw someone walking near the already dead monster, and this unknown person was wearing a white cloak. There was also something strange. Before they disappeared, a dark smoke appeared around them, and according to the witness, it looked like dark magic. Devon also overheard Karan's conversation with Evelyn, and he said that dark magic had long since disappeared from this world, so the witness was lying. The novel said nothing about dark magic, so Evelyn decided to ask. The knight told her that, unlike divine or magical powers, little was known about dark magic. All that was known was that dark magic was the magical power that arises after a contract with a demon. Karen's story was also joined by the prince, who said that demons did not exist. The source of divine power was God, and the source of magical power was nature, so this power belonged to some other being about whom little was known. Evelyn had missed that the power that helped her and Devon could be that being that no one knew anything about until now. They now had a plan to find at least some information about this creature, so Devon was to work on inviting wizards to learn more about the dark force. Evelyn was to try to find clues in ancient manuscripts, and Karen was to go back to Elion and try to find other clues. Flipping through the pages far into the first book she had in her hands today, she still could not find the information she needed. There was too little in the books. In all the years that the main character had spent in the temple, she had never heard of dark magic. This could only mean that the topic of dark magic was kept in the strictest confidence. A new maid named Eunice entered the room where the ancient books were carelessly scattered. She apologized to Evelyn because she was supposed to have cleaned the room earlier. Deciding to take advantage of what information the new maid might have, the blonde asked her if she knew of a possible library or bookstore in the duchy. The maid said that there was a bookstore, but she was not sure if they would have what Evelyn was looking for, as they sold mostly novels. Still, it was hard to get information in the duchy, so Evelyn had to go to the empire. The capital had the largest library, and it was most likely that she would find the book she was looking for there. In the capital, Evelyn had to face the people from the temple, but first she had to find some information about dark magic. In addition, she still had one more task. Judging by the fact that the temple is still looking for the blonde girl, Cordelia is still there, so the Duchess had to deal with that as well. Suddenly, the blonde girl heard Devon's familiar voice behind her, saying that it was a little strange that Evelyn had suggested going to the capital first. He helped her put her luggage into the carriage and told her that the day of the wedding ceremony had already been set for next month. The girl suddenly asked if the prince could find Cordelia in the capital, to which he replied that it would not be difficult to try. But he was curious to know the reason for their meeting with Evelyn. They were not friends, but the blonde girl felt guilty about her illness, so she would like to try to help her. Of course, the abuse of the temple was not Evelyn's fault, but she felt guilty not because of that, but because she took her place. If everything had gone according to the story, the real protagonist of the book would be here now, smiling cheerfully. The prince decided to share something personal and break the awkward atmosphere between them, so he said that once, 10 years ago, when he was cursed, he woke up and saw absolutely nothing. At first he blamed his sister for all this, because if she had not had the imperial mark, or if she had not been born at all, then Devon would have been the only heir to the throne.